So let's take it from the top and ask a few questions just to you all in general, and then I'm going to hit some specific ones for each of you in terms of what your firms are doing. First, from your company perspective, as you look at technology, give us just a real quick flavor of how you're looking at it from an investment side and then also from a service side. You're going to buy the product. Start over here with Sarah.
Well, let me start by saying as an occupier and a corporate real estate person, I'm looking at real estate technology about how that lets me do my job better. It's not, we are not I'm going to say something that doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to say we're not a real estate company, even though we're a REIT. And when I say that, that's because we're an operating company. We are kind of an odd REIT. We became a REIT in 2014. But sort of the North Star for us is about operating our business really well on the 6 continents that we're on and the 53 countries and the 85 million square feet. And my role as I look out over there, as we develop across all of these countries, is figuring out what technologies are going to allow me to do the job that I have to do in my organization on behalf of Iron Mountain, which is create value, lower costs, and mitigate risk. And so that's the lens that I'm looking through when I look out at the technology that's out there.
Great.
Yeah, for JLL, really what we've invested in the last probably 5 years is said we have to be able to service our large global clients. And what we focused on is that base layer. So Steve was up here before talking about these different point solutions, and somebody talked about CoStar. How can somebody take them out by connecting into it? So what we've invested in is our MarketSphere platform, which is a America's first but also global platform that takes that base layer of properties and now allows us to feed in all that third-party information. So things like VTS, things like Wired Score, some things from CoStar. And what that allows us to do is then visualize this in our service tools like Blackbird, Portfolio Analytics. So the core focus has been getting that data right. A large global 85,000 employee company, we had to get the data right at the base layer, set that foundation, and then place point solution systems on top of it.
Gotcha. Charlie?
So for us, every new technology that we're looking at these days really is looked at through the lens of, does it improve our physical product, the buildings that we build or buy or manage, or does it improve the level of service that we deliver? I think one of the reasons why we brought internal people into this new innovation group that we have is all from development within Hines is to look at all of these exciting opportunities and tools you can use and say, is this something I would want in my project? Because we really want our tools to be able to stand on their own such that when they're looked at all of our individual projects, they make quick sense to the folks that are making the decision. So we start there as it relates to the operational partnership. And then from there, we take the next step, often with Brad and Fifth Wall, to decide whether we want to go to another level of partnership with these companies to really get into the financial conversation and make sure that we have a voice and understand where these companies are growing and changing. That helps us explore and mitigate the risk a little bit of trying these new technologies.
Yeah, it's a unique view you have as a user, isn't it? Kevin?
So Brookfield, I mean, the global organization is really, we're an asset management company. And the short story on the 120-year-old company is that in the last 17 years, we've grown from $10 billion of assets to $270 billion of assets under management. 58% of that's in real estate. Our use of technology tends to be almost exclusively, if not principally, focused on revenue generating opportunities. So in our ports business, for example, we've got a large infrastructure business. We've got a couple of ports outside of Los Angeles where we have been able to fully automate the process from the time that the containers arrive on the ships to the time that they're placed on trucks or trains and transported away without any human intervention at all. So we use technology in ways that we think that we can significantly increase efficiency and revenue generating opportunities, as opposed to, for example, in our real estate business, so we actually have 600 million square feet of real estate that we own and operate around the world. I think about 190 of it is office buildings. Up until the end of last year, we had 28 different legacy accounting and finance systems in North America alone, just for our real estate business.
Yep.
Because what we've historically done is, as we acquire businesses and assets, is we leave the existing information management systems, if you want to call that, usually Excel spreadsheets, in place. And so it wasn't until the beginning of this year that we actually went to an ERP that consolidates all of that information. And so what we're doing now, as we look, and we'll talk a little bit later about some of the companies we're looking at as either vendors or tenants, and sometimes as venture capital level investments, of where we can find companies that are not just terrific operators in a category, but they also have as part of their DNA the ability to develop technology. Because in our organization, the culture is not very accepting of new practices and is very wary of real estate, of technology, as many companies in the real estate industry are. And so we're using our relationship with these emerging, what I'll call disruptive businesses, as a way to import that technology and the benefits from it into the larger organization.
You know, one of the things you brought up is we see all these new tech companies up behind us on the screen, and they all tend to be startups that Steve was talking about. But there's a tremendous amount of cleanup from the old days, isn't there, in terms of the old software companies that were doing our books, weren't even into the cool stuff. There's a big opportunity there. Now, one of the questions we had talked about, and I'm going to phrase it a little bit different than we had talked about, which was which companies either you guys invested in or you do business with have had a huge impact. And I'll give you one that had a huge impact but is no longer with us. And my team at Boston Properties says I just got to quit crying about this. Path Intelligence. Anybody use Path Intelligence here? So it was a retail software that allowed you to understand the tracking of your customers. For us, it was the Prudential Center. And I just love this product. Just love this product. We had analytics just outstanding. We made our decision to do the Italy deal based on Path Intelligence. We were able to divide our retailers into givers and takers. A taker is somebody that you went to their store and you didn't go to any place else. A giver was somebody that you went into and you went other places. By the way, Sephora, you'll go to 4.2 other places after you go to Sephora. I was the last customer. They're gone. They don't exist anymore. But it was a huge impact, but there's gonna be some casualties in this as well. And it's so important that I know that our team, led by Jim Whalen, is always thinking about vetting who's gonna make it, who's gonna be good for the platform, and also good for security. But for you guys, anybody have a story of a big impact that maybe surprised you all, either investment or on the operational side?
On the investment side, about 2 years ago, we made an investment in a work order management system, CREgo. So, you know, with JLL and the amount of management for industrial space across the globe, we had the need to have this mobile workforce. And we had the idea of either hiring engineers and putting them under the JLL umbrella, or going with the Uber mentality, where we say that we create this app, we create this marketplace, where if I have a HVAC system that goes down in industrial space, I could have that engineer that's a JLL employee go fix it, or instead we could build almost that Angie's List approach, where we build the marketplace and then parse it out to the correct engineer to facilitate that. And we've now rolled that out across our entire facilities management and property management businesses, which has added huge efficiencies.
Wow, working well.
Working well.
Fantastic.
Well, I'm just going to say I have sort of a 360 view, I think, from a lot of different things. One, you saw Flexi up there. We're their largest partner, if you will. We have warehouses all over the world, and they need space. And when we have the ability to give them space, we do deals with them all over. On the other hand, I'm looking at operating all of these facilities, and I have big partnerships with CBRE. I have partnerships with JLL, and I think what I've observed with a lot of the startups is not a complete understanding of the whole industry, and tending to be focused on the types of things that you guys have been talking about, and less understanding of somebody that's sitting in my position, which is I'm not insourcing. I am not managing 85 million square feet of real estate with Iron Mountain employees. And if I have 200 or 300 CBRE or JLL employees dedicated 100% to my account doing this work, they are providing me the platform to do that, so that the sale is not to me. The sale needs to be to the CBREs or the JLLs or the Cushmans or the whatever of the world to integrate into their platform. And it's been just my observation that's a missing link in some of how people are thinking about where they need to market and sell their new products and services.
That's good insight. We're going to come back to the missing link part there, Sarah. Guys, anything come to mind, big impact?
You know, our perspective, I think, might be a little bit different in that for a long time we've looked at, because we're a vertically integrated company, we looked at other places to go as well. So we looked at getting into the elevator business, we looked at getting into the curtain wall business, said no, we're later glad we said no, and then we looked at the broadband business, said yes, let's do it, then we were not happy that we did that eventually. And so there's this very clear line on our end, which is that the operational partnership comes first, and whatever it is, moving forward on an investment basis is kind of starts at the operating level. And I frankly think that our biggest and most impactful ones are yet to come, for sure.
Yeah, you bring up a good point in terms of, for those who don't have a history on the industry, I think for us even, one of the reasons we've kept our discipline to what we do was a lot of real estate people lost a lot of money in previous generations getting into things that they didn't have focus on, or whether it was broadband, et cetera. So there's still some toes stunk from those days, and when you look at it, a lot of people go, well, you definitely should be investing in this. And a lot of people, for right reasons, are saying, no, I shouldn't, because it's not my expertise.
So one of the ways that, excuse me, Brookfield feels as though we distinguish ourselves is that we're a control-oriented investor with an owner-operator mentality. So we don't look just for opportunistic, pure-play investments, but really look for long-term properties in core markets that we can hold on to for a long time. So using many of you are probably familiar with the World Financial Center in New York City. It's been built, it's been around for over 30 years. It was built in the late 80s. And when it was originally occupied, it was in a kind of a barren wasteland of landfill that had been created from the excavation of the World Trade Center. So it was all by itself, and every one of the big financial services tenants created its own little cocoon with a cafeteria and a doctor's office and everything else. So when the workers came in, they stayed there all day and then they left. And what we've, I think, identified and recognized over the last 15 years is that my friend Chris Kelly made a comment that was quoted before, that what tenants demand, and then it went ... What we're really focused on is not the tenants themselves, but what the employees of the tenants demand. And we see this huge competition for labor manifesting itself in decisions by tenants being decided by where their workers want to live, work, and play. And so we use that 24-hour-a-day live, work, play ecosystem term as a way to describe placemaking. So we describe something as a Brookfield place. It means that the lower level of the building, some portion of it, is going to contain all different kinds of amenities and activations, including but not limited to food and beverage and retail. So as we were starting to look into the other kinds of amenities that tenants would find appealing over the last 3 or 4 years, we originally started looking at some of the co-working companies and businesses. And what we learned is that the big tenants that tend to be in our properties did not see that as complementary to their occupancy. And about 2.5 years ago, we were introduced to Convene, which hosts meeting, conference, and training centers in office buildings. It was introduced to us by one of our tenants who was looking at a 400,000 square foot program. And he said to us, I'm not going to use my boardroom more than once a quarter. I don't need a town hall, and I want to create a Google-like food and beverage experience for my employees, but I don't want to have to pay for any of that on a long-term lease basis. I don't want to operate it. If you put a Convene into the World Financial Center, now Brookfield Place, I'll do a forward commit for 20% of the space, and I'll give you a couple floors back. And what that resulted in is Brookfield now owning about 24% of Convene, and working very actively to deploy that operating model in our portfolios around the world. And we just opened up 4, we're in the process of opening up 4 locations in Los Angeles. We're looking hard at Houston, Houston, London, and Sydney. And the reason I bring that up as an example is because it's not just an emerging new business and category, but it's a company that's changing the way that buildings are going to be operated in the future. And a core element of what they're building is also a technology platform that we can take advantage of and use.
And I will say that Brookfield Place concept is something that I think is a fantastic one, because one of the things that we're doing within our own assets as well is trying to bolster that experience and trying to support our tenants, our customers, as they do go out there and kind of fight for the best folks and spend more time in their buildings. And we're looking at our portfolio and on the broader sense in terms of trying to figure out ways that we can allow our tenants to move more easily throughout the portfolio that we do have. So we have about 450 million feet that we own or manage around the world, and we want to be able to allow ourselves to have relationships with our customers beyond the one single suite that they're in. And so that is going to be an undertaking that we'll see if we can pull off, but the concept of having a real live, work, play kind of combined concept that Brookfield is able to do has been really impressive for me as I've done a deeper dive into trying to create better services and better experiences, actually being able to have it all in one place and control it all.
Yeah, Convene's a great one. Chris Kelly spoke at our Boston Properties University this year in September, and he really rocked the house in terms of his vision of building in the future. But he also emphasized, look, I got great technology teamed up with me, but I still got to create some good food and have good services. And I think it's a great example of old world meeting the new. My next question, I'll start off with a quick story. Many of you know I'm a groupie of the MIT Media Lab, and some say stalker, and that's when I'm the old gray guy in the back of the room in the class listening in to Sandy Pentland's presentations over there. But 2 young men from India that I've been working with in terms of a concept they got going, they teasingly called me one night Sherpa. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And they go, you're our mountain guide for real estate, because they don't understand. They got this great technology and great algorithms and all these things, but they don't understand our business. So the question for you, fellow Sherpas, mountain guides in the real estate industry, what advice do you have? We got VCs here today, we've got investors, we've got startup companies. What advice do you as to how to get in to a customer and sell their product, either get an investment or sell the product? Because let's face it, our industry is tough to even get a job in to describe to people how to get in.
Yeah, I mean, being JLL, I mean, we have a small team that tracks every one of these tech startups here. So Steve mentioned they have 2,300 that they're tracking. We have a few hundred, so not 2,300, but we meet with every one of these startups, each one of their leadership. We understand their run rates, their business model. And one thing that we've come to notice is the ones that tend to fail, they can't speak our language. They come in with a tech background, but don't have that real estate background. Mm-hmm. The other thing in terms of selling to us, you have to realize, Steve mentioned that each one of these companies is taking a little bit off of our margins. And leadership at the C-suite level is not going to come in, hear a pitch, even if it's VTS or a tool that has as much proliferation as that. We're not going to just buy in on the first pitch. It's this grassroots buildup of coming and saying, hey, I found some brokers in our San Diego office that started to use this. I see some brokers in our Chicago office. And building that groundswell where it starts to get a movement within JLL or CB or Cushman, where it just makes sense to move that forward. So I think you do have to make the C-suite aware of your tool, but it's also that ground up groundswell, because we're not going to make the decision whether it's hundreds of thousands of dollars or $1 million enterprise check until we actually have the brokers that have vetted this tool and know that it's going to add value both to us, but also to the clients that sit on this stage, the JLL services.
Yeah, I know from our perspective also, the security standpoint is huge. And what I always tell the startups coming in, and they may have a great idea, is sometimes they don't want to do this, but you have to talk to our IT department. You have to get their confidence, because if you don't have that confidence, you're not going to be able to bridge this security chasm, which is so important for the larger firms, especially some of the firms up here today with large assets. You can't afford to have a system that can get hacked through, and we know some of the biggest hacks have actually been through the real estate systems, right?
Just simple things like single sign-on. Coming in and saying that, oh, we'll give you your own credentials, that doesn't work at organizations of any of our size.
Yeah, anything
So,
else, guys?
so I would say that, I mean, it's got to work, and it has to create value. And not as only does it have to do those two things, but you really, really have to know how to convey the value proposition of the value add in a way that people can understand it financially and quantifiably. So I use as an example a product called Honest Buildings. So you asked about another investment that we made. Brad Gray happens to be on the board of it. They pitched our property management and operations group in New York, who are some of the crustiest, most skeptical guys you'll ever meet and don't want to change anything, and they'd rather use number 2 pencils and paper.
It's not just your company.
We're all Luddites, right? But Honest Buildings has taken it's a capital project management platform, and we now have 400 capital projects in Washington, D.C., New York, and Boston. They're all being run on a single platform from the initial estimate through procurement till the final cost at the end. And instead of doing 3 or 4 days of reconciliation with meeting after meeting after meeting with all the different property managers, Dan Kinberg can hit one button and have a full reconciliation of all the data that used to take days and weeks to assemble. And what that also does is it creates a database for our acquisition team to go in and make much more specific and thoughtful underwriting estimates in our property acquisition. So the takeaway there is, I mean, we see, just like everybody up here, because we're a big organization, every new organization or every new startup and idea come in, what the companies that get traction must do is they've got to actually do everything that you're talking about.
Right.
And they've got to be able to perform at scale as it begins to increase.
Yeah, you
So
got to
I
get that
would-
groundswell from the people that are working it, and it's hard for everybody in the tech industry to figure that out and who it is. But when it happens, it's really cool. So I was talking to Ben Myers, our head of sustainability, and he's loving it. I think it's AccuCore is the name of the company, and he's using it for energy and things like that. Loves their leadership, Logan, and I'd never heard about it before, but it's already in our system, and he's using it and loves it. But that enthusiasm from the people who dig the product is pretty key.
So Koop, the thing that was really neat about Honest Buildings, it started with Dan Kinberg, 40 plus years in operations, and we made a $5 million investment, but now we start to club these deals, and we go to Charlie at Hines, and we go to Blackstone, and we go to RXR and Oxford, and we look to encourage them to invest alongside of us so that we can find the best performer in an emerging new category and ensure that they have the highest probability of winning so that we end up having a platform that we can depend on. So that the amount of collaboration that we've seen gel in the last 18 months is like nothing I've experienced in the 35 years I've been in the real estate industry.
Yeah, it's really brought a bunch of real estate people together like I've never seen before. Sarah, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think when you ask like what the question is, what's a piece of advice? I would say you have to have a lot of patience and persistence because it's going to be a long sales cycle. It's big companies, and you're selling not only to the JLLs or the CBREs or the whatever. You're trying to get people in their company to see the value and use it. At the same time, you're trying to get people that hire them, i.e. me, to see the value in your product and push them to invest and consider it and use it, because if I think it's valuable, then maybe they should think it's valuable if I'm a really big client. So you have many, many, many sales to make. They are all different. People are coming with a different perspective at each time. You need to understand that. You need to understand how the business actually works. You need to have the right language. You need to understand that there's not one occupier out there, and I'm going to overstate this, there's probably a couple, that is not constrained by budgets in terms of how they're operating their portfolio and managing that. And so you have to think about your revenue model, how you're actually going to make money at this, who's going to pay for it. If you convince me that it's really good and I try and convince JLL and CBRE that it's really good, who's ultimately paying for that? And again, it gets back to the question of where's it taking the margin? Because if I have a new really cool system that I want to use which I do, that relies on human sensors, we have to figure out how I'm paying my outsource provider to do that so that they still make money and the new startup makes money and I'm not going over some crazy budget. So there's a lot to consider, and it's really important that you understand that.
So as you guys look at the industry, we've got so many new companies that were listed here. Is there anything that stands out to you guys that you're going, oh, I wish there was an app for that, because that's still killing me and there's nobody hitting it hard? The one that my office keeps talking about is, oh my gosh, the lease document. It's still barbarians at the gate. I mean, it's so primitive. Anything calling for pain and that maybe the investors out there could direct some smart people to?
It's a hard one. I'm not really going to answer it directly because I think it assumes that there are people here who are trying to do that aren't doing a good job at it, so I'm not going to answer that really directly. But I will say that that what I'm finding often is that there's not a direct link between the product that's being delivered and the demand, right? And so either the industry really wants it and there isn't a provider there yet, and so that creates all of this anxiety and concern and conversations about how do we resolve this issue, or it's a product that's being pushed on the industry that just doesn't necessarily agree with it or want it. And so I think that disconnect is very common, and I think that's what creates a lot of this kind of energy that's going around the industry as people try to figure out exactly what they're going to do. But that's how I'm going to answer that question. Thank you.
I'd say one thing, Kevin, you mentioned honest buildings, I mentioned VTS. Just, we need to play nicer in the sandbox and integrate one another. If I'm an asset manager, I need to have honest buildings up on my computer, VTS, our JLL, Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics CRM system. But we're not seeing enough industry players come in and say, hey, we have that best-in-class tool. We go deep in this vertical, but we also integrate with our partners that we know you already have relationships with, right? Because if I'm bringing to our asset manager, not our asset manager, our agency, leasing brokers, or property managers, one more tool, that's one more thing they have to learn, one more thing that they have to understand. So the more that we can integrate horizontally, I think the better for us to buy into the tools as well.
Yeah, there was a question by one of the people in the audience earlier about the platform, and another way of saying it is the dashboard, right? I hear it from the asset managers that, man, if I could just have everything at one dashboard, and it's going to be a while probably before we get all the silos together.
It's that mint.com view, right? All of your financial information in one view. That's what we need.
So we were talking about fracking in terms of how the business is still so fragmented. The term that we use within Brookfield to talk about what the next stage is going to be is just call it Moneyball for real estate.
Yep.
And figuring out how we integrate Yardi and Honest Buildings and VTS and Argus Enterprise and these other tools so that we have a single data lake that we can then really start to make more money and grow our assets under management by using data. And so to the extent that the tools that you're working on, Convene's got their Elevate platform that we see as a way to plug in a lot of the different point solutions. But as we gather data across the spectrum of the different new businesses that are being created, to think about linkage and playing well in the sandbox together, I think is one of the key defining thoughts. And Charlie and I participated in a little roundtable in New York last week with several of the companies I mentioned and before and others, where we just talked about what we're doing together and how we can not just club deals, but club ideas and partner with Brad and Fifth Wall and some of these other emerging venture capital firms to really figure out what the new categories are and then who the organizations that are cut out to be leaders within those categories will be.
Yeah, you brought up Moneyball. I took a short class at MIT on analytics from the sports point of view, and I think the biggest takeaway for me of that class was, okay, you can have a bunch of groovy information, but if you're not doing anything with it and it's not giving you the on-base percentage, what good is it? And I think we got a lot of technology out there giving us groovy information that's kind of interesting, and you go, look at that, but you're not using it to make
The
money.
reason we use Moneyball, and VTS, had the writer of the book last year speak, but if we start using words like data analytics or blockchain, or people's eyes in our organization, I think in our industry, tend to glaze over.
Well, we are the last bastion.
We are
student.
the last adopters. But that concept is driving a lot of our adoption of technology in its early stages. We've talked about the companies here, but also the integration of it so that we can start to catch up with what other industries and companies have done and use our information a lot more effectively to drive value.
Okay, so some specific questions to you guys. Charlie, so you just made a big investment in Fifth Wall VC. Give us a little bit of thoughts on that and value add from your perspective.
Sure. So really the thought process there was that we were all aware of this great deal of change that was happening in our industry and all these technology companies that were providing these new ideas and new tools, and we did not have the expertise internally to actually figure out how to organize them, how to identify. We thought we could figure out which tool was the best one to use, but we certainly didn't know how to find the tool that would be the one to win the day over the longer term. And so the idea was to utilize the capital that we have to invest in Fifth Wall really from the perspective of trying to get organized access to information, to really understand early trends as they were going on. And what we found was that while we certainly do get that, it has been a great partnership in that we are when we find something that we want to solve or something new that we want to do, and we point Fifth Wall in that direction, the combination of their consulting services and their capital is powerful. And so it's been a great partnership so far.
That's a great way to learn more from both sides. So Kevin, you mentioned your investment in Convene. Any other things to highlight in terms of you're seeing things organically and you can spot it and then invest in it? Any other additions to your investment strategy as you look at new companies?
So Brookfield's become very effective at deploying massive amounts of capital, and everybody's read about our acquisition of GGP. We bought Canary Wharf a couple of years ago. But when it came time to make a $12 million investment in Convene, I could not find a single person in the entire company that had ever had any experience with a $5 or $10 million investment, a venture capital level of investment.
Right.
And so we fought our way through, and then we met Fifth Wall. I met Brad. I actually reached out to them, went by their office. I was still, I'm almost all the time in a full suit and tie, and I went to Venice Beach.
I wore a tie because I knew I was going to be sitting next to you.
And what we did is we worked hard to get Fifth Wall to come in as our partner in the third round on the Convene deal. We put another $5 million in Honest Buildings, and we created a lot of attention within the investment committee and the broader reaches of the organization about how we were bringing innovation to the company with these micro investments. And so what we've now done is we've allocated $200 million from our balance sheet and set up our own venture fund. It's led by a guy from Silver Lake who is on the board of SpaceX. He knows technology, we know real estate, and we're partnering in as heavy a level as we can with Brad and Brendan at Fifth Wall and other companies who are a lot smarter in this space than we are.
I think that's been a big thing for us as well, is the outside voice. And that outside voice can be someone that you hire, or it can be someone that you decide to partner with. But we found that outside voice and understanding as to how to value these kinds of companies has been, it's been a big, to go back to the word anxiety reducer, and gives everybody a lot more confidence to actually take those smaller bets and learn as much as we are.
So Mike, your new vehicle I think is called Spark. Is that correct? Now, do I have this right? $200 million in venture capital placed recently, or is that just raised and you're about to place?
That I can't speak to that number,
Okay.
but the Spark team. So about 9 months ago, similar to what Kevin said, is JLL, this huge behemoth of a company. How do we figure out how to underwrite a deal? How do we figure out how to be good evaluators of where VC dollars should go? So we brought on Ishai, Lerner, and Mahir, who actually had experience in this. These were earlier investors in Uber and other companies out in Silicon Valley, and instead of making the decision to go out there and partner with some of the other VCs, which we also have, the Navitases of the world, we brought Ishai and Mahir in-house to actually evaluate and incubate our own JLL investments in some of these companies. So some of you may have seen a couple weeks ago, we bought a company outright called Stessa, which is a service provider in the multifamily space, that long tail, some of the smaller assets. But those are the type of investments, until the onboarding of Ishai and Mahir, JLL, similar to what Brookfield, we would have been a fish out of water trying to make these evaluations. So one, we brought on outside talent, but two, we've gone out there and partnered and placed capital in the Navitases of the world. And then we also sit on advisory boards for other companies like Modern Ventures, Metaprop, so on and so forth, so that we can understand and be the first to hear of these different companies. So we're just an enormous funnel of information to understand where to place that capital and just what we can leverage out there in the marketplace to serve our clients better.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Our company is taking a different strategy. We're not investors in the tech sector, and we don't have a group to do it. But I would say that we are very, very involved in this new prop tech sector, mainly led by Jim Whalen, who's a leader in the industry and our REIT industry, vetting out these companies all the time, learning more about them. And I think we've taken a point of view that, look, we need to know the best ones so we can get those in our portfolios to help drive our mission. So Sarah, maybe a different question for you, for the point of view from you being you're a different, call it, user of real estate. Is there anything out there that you've seen that's not, call it, mainline to our buildings, that you're seeing out there in storage that's come up?
In storage. Yeah, that's going to take us off topic, but I will say this. I will say this. Our industry, our business is undergoing a dramatic change. And where you may know Iron Mountain as the box people who are storing records, and we do that, we are transforming our company as we speak into really a full information management company. And by that, I mean this. We do business with the Fortune 1000, 95% of them. They have trusted us for 60 years to store their documents, to store their backup tapes. Google is our largest client in terms of storing tapes around the world, and they still use tapes. But they're all going on a digital journey. Everybody is going on a digital journey. And we are leveraging the relationships that we have, the connections with all of the IT departments that we've had over the years to basically transform what it is we're storing, how it is we're storing it for them, so that we can be their partner on their journey as they digitize. I do want to say one other, so we are developing, and we are developing that in-house. We launched a product which this group wouldn't know about because it's not in your space. We launched a product called Iron Cloud that launched this past year. We continue to add to that, and we'll be doing, we just launched one to do archiving, security camera video, archiving that in a very inexpensive way for folks, and there's all kinds of stuff that's coming down the pike.
So what's really interesting is you're becoming a technology company if you already weren't before.
That is right.
Yeah.
That's 100% right.
And doing your own homegrown things.
That's right.
Fantastic.
I will say this, with my portfolio, what I have to worry about are things around security, around fire protection, because what I sell to the world, what Iron Mountain sells to the world is secure space for your information. And we're going to run a pilot for one of the companies that's in here right now that we're really trying to trying to get one of our service provider partners to get going with, that basically leverages, we all have sensors everywhere. We put them, we have smart buildings, da-da-da-da-da, but this product uses the people for that. And when you have a warehouse out in the middle of nowhere, and we have thousands and thousands of them, and there's very few people in them because a lot of this storage is not moved around quickly, having the ability to leverage people and leverage a very simple app on your phone without a installed base of technology is very, very powerful for us. And so that's one of the ones that I'm really looking at.
Great. Mike, do you want to wrap this up? Or? And any questions, or do you want to open up for questions? A couple minutes? Steve?
Anybody with a question? What about blockchain? No, I'm kidding. Kidding. No blockchain. No blockchain. Question. Raise your hand. Yes, sir.
So last week I was in Austin and I was with Dr. Parag Khanna. Do you know him, Steve? He wrote the book on connectivity. So I'm listening about all the technology and how we need to, all the different products out there for efficiency. And one of the things that's a hurdle, it's sort of the one thing that kind of stops, and I want to get your sort of thoughts on it in terms of being efficient, is that we're dealing in connectivity that doesn't have any borders. But we're dealing with real estate that has political state borders. So to be efficient, if I wanted to move one of my, and you all have global real estate, so if I'm a tenant in Boston and I want to open up another facility in Singapore or in India or go to France, the lease that we use in Mass is not the same lease we're going to use in Texas. The energy efficiency, we're on a gridiron in New England that actually we buy a lot of our stuff from Canada, but Texas does it differently. France is on a completely different energy system. So the grid systems are different. The energy systems are different, which creates a lack of efficiency to begin with. So how do you see, is there just a certain, can you only go so far with the technology that you have where you run into these other items that create inefficiency?
Or are we going to standardize globally in the future?
I hope all the entrepreneurs in the room are listening, because that sounds like just a whole swarm of opportunities that the big companies aren't going to solve ourselves.
Yep.
It'll be a function of great ideas coming to us from outside companies, and the big players starting to collaborate more and create more uniformity. But everything you just described represents the current state of the world, commercial real estate, as we know it today, and there's a lot to fix.
Look, I think it's doable. We're doing it in a different fashion in our company. For our clients, we have a product that we've developed called Policy Center. Basically, it allows a global company who would be a client of ours to understand the requirements in every country around the world, around the requirements to maintain information, what types of information. And it does it through a subscription that they get with us that is then updated, information is pushed to them. We manage it all the way through to then their actual data that they have. So as you can imagine, these are different everywhere in the world. They're constantly changing around what has to be maintained, what has to be kept, this kind of privacy, how long it has to be maintained, all that kind of stuff. And so it's doable. But it is, I just don't think that is ultimately something that's going to stop this.
Okay, great question, great answer. One more question.
Yes, one subject that's been not talked about a lot in this panel is cybersecurity. To what extent do you see this as a very serious threat to your businesses and to the economy in general, and how are you approaching it?
Where's Waylon? Is he still here?
Well, I'm a little bit biased. We've got Jim and a great IT team, but it is the #1 priority. We're constantly talking about it. I'm not the person that would be an expert on what we're doing about it, and probably Jim wouldn't want me to share it, but it is such a big deal to us right now, and because it's a big deal to our clients in the buildings.
And we're seeing the risk compound, right? With all the Facebook news and everything else. So even if you have the information, it's secure, and you use it or you let someone else use it, the risk there is so tremendous that that's a much better question for our CTO than it is for me. But there's risks all around it, whether you even have the information.
It's a board level issue for us, and the consolidation of 28 different accounting systems into one is an example of the work we're doing in order to simplify the systems, but it's it's one of the top 2 or 3 risks that we see on the horizon.
Yeah, I think boardroom level is the best way to put it in terms of it's reached our board level as well. And when you have one of the biggest hacks ever going through systems in real estate, it's a concern. So we'll wrap it up. First off, I'd like to say a big thank you to you all for attending this great event, and to the team that put this together, thank you. Can't think of a better place to have a high-tech symposium than the largest screen in the city of Boston behind us, right? And welcome to 100 Fed, and enjoy your time after.